tales of how this town is the, you know, the talk of everywhere else. It's teeming with tourists, etc., etc. And she goes and she wants to have a good time. Unfortunately, she gets to Sanditon and realizes
lies, lies, and more lies, and lies on top of lies.
September was the month when I was delusional enough to think that I was going to be able to finish 19 books. Now, I am certain you've already seen my October TBR, which if you've not seen that video, you should go check it out. But in October, I have plans to read even more books than that, which is just insane because I'm like, yo, Nora, you did not actually finish reading all the books. But I planned on reading 18 books in September and I read 11, which is not bad. I am actually pretty cool about it, except for the fact that of those 11 books, right, 2 of them are very short, incomplete novellas. 2 of them are novellas. 1 of them is a graphic novel and the rest of the books are full novels. So yeah, there is that. But anyway, I'm here to talk about my wrap up. These are all the books I read in September. As always, I'm going to be talking about them based off of the rating. So from the lowest to the highest. I'll kick things off with a book that I did not even rate at all, which I'm certain when I talk about it, you would understand the reason why. The first of which is The Watsons by Jane Austen. Now, The Watsons is one of 2 of Jane Austen's incomplete novels. These are novels she never got to complete in her lifetime. Now, there are other writers who have attempted to complete it, but I never really go looking for those stories because if I'm picking up a Jane Austen novel, I want it to be a Jane Austen novel. So I read the incomplete versions. Now, in all my reading of Jane Austen, and I've read each of her completed novels multiple times, it's the first time I'm going to be reading the incomplete ones, and I actually do feel sort of sadness for it, right? Because, for example, with the Watsons, you follow the story of Emma Watson, who is a young girl who had been taken from her family, a very large family, because she has quite a number of siblings, and as it's often done in those times when you have wealthier relatives, her parents had sent her off to live with a wealthy aunt, but the aunt remarried, and basically Emma had to come back home with nothing. And I enjoyed the premise of that. I also enjoyed the premise of all the different people and all the different characters that she got to meet when she came back. People that did not know exactly how to interact with this young girl who they had known all their life, like when she was a child. But now she's an adult, she's a lady, but without the money of a lady. How do you tell the story of this young girl who came from nothing, who tasted wealth, and who was tossed back down to nothing? What exactly would her psyche be? How would that influence some of the decisions and choices she would take in the story? Like I said, it's just heartbreaking that Jane Austen never got the chance to finish it, because in a way, Emma Watson's story reminds me of Frank Churchill in Emma, because that was exactly what happened with Frank, except for the fact that Frank was able to inherit that wealth. It also reminds me of a similar situation with Fanny Price, but once again, Fanny's relatives didn't die, and in fact, she did move on to something else, something better, some would say. Okay. So the premise is intriguing. The characters, we barely got a glimpse of them, we barely got a hint of them. I wanted more. I felt really dissatisfied that the story was so incomplete, which is like I was the one setting myself up for that torture because I knew what to expect, and yet I was disappointed. I know, human beings, you can never satisfy us, can you? The next incomplete novel that I read that I did not rate is, of course, Jane Austen's Sanditon, whereby we followed Charlotte Haywood, who is like the way in which we start the story off, right? She seems very spirited. She has a mind. She's not afraid to speak up and say her mind, which I was already delighted with. And she's convinced to accompany Mr. and Mrs. Parker over to Sanditon with tales of how this town is the, you know, the talk of everywhere else. It's teeming with tourists, etc., etc. And she goes and she wants to have a good time. Unfortunately, she gets to Sanditon and realizes
lies, lies, and more lies, and lies on top of lies.
And all I was thinking is that just imagine being Charlotte. Like, you've already planned all these things. Imagine all the people she might have told and the experience she's looking forward to. Like, she's looking forward to having an experience like in Bath, like the way in which other young girls her age go to have the time of their life in Bath, and she gets there and just like this dry, boring ass place. I can just imagine what she's thinking. But the thing about a small seaside town is that there is always going to be room for drama. The smaller the town, the bigger the drama. And it pains me that we don't get to see more of those characters. We get glimpses of them, we get hints. There are new people coming to town. Like, it was a book that had the making of not a typical, but a new way of Jane Austen telling her story, and characters that I would have loved to meet and know more of, but we didn't get the chance to do so. Now let's move on to the first rated book on my list, which is the lowest on my wrap-up, which is If I Never Met You by Mvari McFarlane. Yes. Goddamn. How do I see? The entire premise of the story is so cool, right? You have a woman, Laurie, who has been in a relationship with her partner for the last 18 years. They started this relationship when they were 18 in college, and now they're 36. They are both working at the same law firm, and then our ex decides that, oh, you know, he's not been happy, he wants more. He basically has an itch. I would not even say it's it's not a midlife crisis, and it's not a quarter life crisis. So what is in between a quarter and a mid? What do you qualify 35-year crisis? Because he technically had a 35-year crisis, and it was all like, oh no. And this was following conversations Laurie had been having with him that she wants to have kids, right? And basically he dumps her, gives her all that story, only for her to realize 2.5 months later that not only has her ex decided to move on, but you see, it kind of knocked up his new girlfriend. So now his new girlfriend is pregnant. I know you're like, what? What the fuck? So basically, he breaks up with her. She's rightfully humiliated. And then there's Jamie, who is the player at the law firm, but Jamie wants to be partner, and apparently the owners of the law firm are like, oh sorry, we cannot make you partner unless you settle down, which is so stupid. But I get it, because it's the way in which a lot of companies skirt like the edges. They don't give you the higher the position, the more they want someone who is settled and with a family.
Now that's what I call bullshit we won't forget.
So he needs help. She needs help. She needs to prove to everybody that, oh, she's not as absolutely broken as she is on the inside with regards to what is happening with her ex. He needs help because he needs to prove like is, you know, settled, well behaved, etc., etc. And then they fake date. Now this is like one of my favorite tropes. You have fake dating, and then you have older characters. These characters are 36, so I'm like,
delicious. Finally, some good fucking food.
This was giving me everything. Of course, when I looked at how many hours I had left, because I was listening to this on audio, I'm like, hold up, hold the fuck up. You cannot be kidding me. At 70%, no, at 80%, what am I saying? At 85%, the relationship had not started yet. They were still friends. And then boom, next thing you know, it was like, we're in a relationship. I like you, you like me. And then in the last 99% of the time, these two, they had their first big fight. They had a breakup. They had a makeup. They had a fucking marriage proposal.
God keep coming for me. I've been in church.
The way I see it, it seems like Mvari was really she was having a lot of fun telling the story, which I understand. I get it, sis. And then our editor was like, yo, when is the romance going to start? This does not make any sense. It just felt like she told us the story, and then this is the ending I want to get, and so I'm going to move all these pieces in 2 steps, and boom, I've given you the ending. Clearly, she took a lot of learning from Game of Thrones season 8.
You know I'm right.
Was she like, I want to do Game of Thrones romance version? Because that was what we got with the ending of this book. Everything was so rushed. I'm like, what the fuck? This does not make any sense. You cannot have spent so much time giving us believability, and then you lose all form of plausibility and respect in the later part of the book. So yes, I was pissed. I was pissed at the ending. I thought it was rushed. It did not make any sense, especially because of the pacing. Like a story, I know some people might have had a problem with it, but I think that our story would have benefited if it had been 100 pages longer or 120 pages longer. Like, it would have made so much sense. She could have taken time, because you could see that for her to go from a place of distrust and basically believing what everybody has to say about Jamie to her considering Jamie a friend, it would take work. So I'm like, yes, I get it, and I get it that you can actually take them from friends to being in a relationship in a shorter period of time because you've already established trust between them. But there is absolutely no way in which you would have taken this bloody time and dragged shit out and then gave us that rush. Like, what the fuck is this? What the fuck is this? So yes, I gave it 2 stars because I'm still fucking pissed every time I remember it. Now moving on to Rage of Dragons by Evan Winters. Everybody has been talking about Rage of Dragons, and I was just like, oh my god, I cannot wait. Because see, that's the thing. when you tell me that there is a book that is revenge fantasy that also has dragons, you have me sold, you have me invested, you have me interested. And this story followed Tao, who was born into a country that is perpetually at war. This country people basically went to a new world because they were running away from something, and they ran to this new world where they met the inhabitants of the place and basically went into war against them. So yes, he was born into a colonialist country. Yeah. And there's just this frequent use of savages in this book that just eventually, right, even did start calling the tribes by like an actual name. But all that period where there were savages, I was just, and they all it just rubs me wrong because I know we are meant to root for Tao's people. I just want them off the land. I think that you cannot come to another person's land and then try and murder them. It rang too similar to what it is that, you know, a lot of native population have suffered all over the world. That just made me fucking pissed. So there is that. But anyway, Tao is born into a country that's perpetually at war. He doesn't want war. He just wants to have this happy, nice, sweet life with the girl he fancies. But when it is that his father is murdered, brutally murdered, he gets sworn to vengeance. Now, prior to this, Tao was your everyday guy. It wasn't like he was exceptionally strong or exceptionally powerful. But this thirst for revenge, this vengeance that pulsates deep within him, drives him and fills him with this single-minded focus that has him taking actions and decisions that are both selfish and very self-destructive, but all for a goal, which is to kill the people that were responsible for the death of his father. I love me a good revenge fantasy novel, and like I was living for all the revenge fantasy parts. I think what pulled me out of the story is, one, I think that the female characters in this were not properly fleshed out. It suffered from a lack of female characters. One of the lead characters, and it just seemed like she was just a mouthpiece for the world building, to just spew world building facts. So it wasn't like Ivan didn't really go as in-depth in the world building for this. And with regards how certain powers worked, like we didn't get to experience that. And I think if he had made this a dual point of view novel, would have been able to get a hint of that. I actually am slightly sad because the prologue had Queen Typha's perspective, and I wanted more of that. And I think that if Evan had gone in that direction, we would have been able to get an idea of how this world actually plays out. I still think that the pacing of this was amazing. I think that the action was fast. I think that Evan Winters knows how to write a good fight scene. Like, that was in those moments. Being one of the spectators, he can write fight scenes. He can write war scenes. I think that he was able to capture the brutality of the war that they are in. I would also say, though, that this book did suffer a bit for me. I don't think major characters that we loved, they did not actually die. So I was just like, maybe I'll be scarred. Maybe I've been scarred. Maybe I don't have a heart, because when someone tells me, oh, you're gonna cry, I want to cry. And when I don't cry, I'm like,
the deception, the betrayal, man, you deceived me.
And also, I think that some part of the ending was a bit rushed. I think that there were a lot of things that were very convenient. I don't want to go into any details because I don't want to spoil things. But there was a discovery with regards to the power that the princess wielded in this book. And we're all like, oh, I thought they said that the power was gone from your lineage. And I'm like, who said this? You're saying this like we had a prior knowledge of this, but we did not. And it just kind of took me out of that part of the story, because I'm like, did I miss it? And also, the only other beef I had with this was that the stakes of this was low. When I say the stakes, I don't mean that people were not dying, because in that case it was happening, but the stakes for this, for Tao, were low, in the sense that it was this focus driven, selfish, taking a lot of self-destructive decisions. And yes, it's like Evan flirted with this possibility of Tao suffering from it, but he never delivered with Tao suffering from it. And I had a problem with that, because I'm like, it seemed like his behavior was being rewarded. And in a revenge fantasy, yes, you want these characters to get their revenge, but you want them to experience some setbacks. And it didn't seem like Tao was experiencing any setback in this book. So it felt like the stakes for him was very low. But I did enjoy it. I cannot wait for the Fires of Vengeance. Like, lay it on me! Moving on to the first 4-star on the list, it's Mansfield Park by Jane Austen. Let me just tell you all that I do my reread of Jane Austen like every other year. And when I say reread of Jane Austen, I mean all her books. And yeah, I finished that reread this month. So you'll be seeing a lot of Jane Austen rereads on this. So this was my reread of Mansfield Park. It was like the 4th reread. And I gave it a 4-star. It's my least favorite of Jane Austen's novels. Not like it is not good. It's just that of all her novels is my least favorite. And I think the reason why it's my least favorite is not because this story, unlike the others, does really have a lot of things that it addresses. You know, it addresses abuse. We get a bit of the slave trade. It talks about adultery and propriety, and I just felt like these were things that needed to be said. And there's a part where Jane Austen runs this commentary about how, you know, the world is not fair to women, especially in adulterous relationship, because at her time the person that suffers it is the woman. The man often goes away scot-free, as we can see from the fucking ass story that is Henry Crawford, who I loathe.
I fucking hate him.
I think that Mansfield Park would have benefited without a romance. Like younger Noria, when I first read it, I was like, what the hell, this is boring. But when I read it again, I'm like, it's not bad. And then the 3rd reread, I'm like, okay, I didn't mind the romance. But this is my 4th reread and I'm older now, and all I was just thinking, I was like, this story would have benefited like amazingly well if it had not had a romance. Like imagine if the story had ended with Fanny being right all along, which we already knew she was right, but Fanny being confirmed to be right all along, and then she just continued getting the good graces and respect of everybody around her. She was able to live her life. Eventually she got over a crush on Edmund, and yes, I know a lot of people are like, oh my god, they're cousins. Like, see, I know that at that point in time, at the time when the story was written, it made sense and it was logical for you. Like, it was not frowned upon for you to end up with your cousin. So that's not my objection to the relationship between Fanny and Edmund. No, my objection is the fact that Edmund did not deserve her. Edmund Bertram did not deserve her. Edmund Bertram did not deserve anybody. For you to try to force a relationship where for 99.9999% of the book wanted to end up with Mary, and then boom, when it was that I realized actually who exactly Mary was, and I was like, oh, I don't want to be with Mary anymore, then it turned to Fanny. And I get it. Jane Austen, like, because she did break the 4th wall in her stories, not with regards Fanny or the characters talking to us, but we could hear her voice like she was talking to us through the text. And when she was like, my dearest Fanny, you knew Fanny was one of her favorite characters, and I get it. I know a lot of people don't like Fanny because she's quiet, but at the same time, I'm like, she's a victim of abuse. She, like, her losing all that agency and always being terrified and not wanting to use her voice, but she's someone who was able to stand her ground. So Fanny is amazing. I love Fanny. But see, that's the thing. And I know that Jane Austen also loves Fanny, and I think that the way in which she wrote her relationship with Edmund at the end, it seemed like Jane was trying to reward Fanny because of how much she loved her. But all I was just thinking is that Edmund is not a prize. Edmund was in no way a reward. Fanny Price deserved better than Edmund Bertram. I'm just saying. She also deserved way better than Henry Crawford, so let's just put it out there, but she definitely deserved better than Edmund Bertram. And I personally think that the story, all the things that, you know, Jane Austen had to say could have been said without romance being there, right? It would have been an amazing, groundbreaking story without romance. It just irks me that it took Edmund to the end of the novel, to the final realization of who the kind of person that Mary was, for him to realize that, oh, Fanny, it seemed like Fanny was a consolation prize.
Thanks, I hate it.
Also, the fact that, of course, it's the girl that he has been in other ways grooming since she was a child, because, of course, he loves everything about Fanny. She's basically a mirror to himself. Edmund Bertram is a narcissistic piece of shit.
And that's on period.
The next 4-star book I read is another Jane Austen, Lady Susan. I love Lady Susan. Like, a Machiavellian mind just makes me very happy. She's manipulative, but also so fucking coy and so fucking smart. I love her. She's basically the feminine version of like a John Willoughby or an Erin Crawford, you know, or a Captain Tilney, for example. And I just, I love Lady Susan. I feel sorry for her daughter, yes, but Lady Susan is an epistolary novel, the first of Jane Austen's novel, but she never did publish it. I wonder why. Maybe she felt like her society was not ready for a character like Lady Susan, because she's not really a protagonist, but at the same time you could see that Jane Austen was kind of rooting for her, because the ending she gave her compared to the ending she gave Maria Bertram, for example, you can always tell when Jane Austen loves a character. There's just an ending she gives them, I'm just like, Jane, I love you. But yes, so I love Lady Susan. Lady Susan is a recently widowed woman who is looking for a rich husband for her daughter, and would basically gaslight and bully the girl into following her footsteps, and also likes to talk, you know, like a razor behind her teeth, behind her smiles. She smiles, and then what she writes to her friend is totally different. And I think it's a criticism of a society, you know, where you have to pretend, you have to say one thing when you actually mean another. Because even in the relationship and her interaction with her sister-in-law, you could see that come through, because her sister-in-law as well did not like her. And I found it very interesting. I loved the entire story. I think the reason why I gave it a 4-star was because I felt it was too short. I felt that more could have been told about these characters. It just felt like we were plucked in the middle of the story, and I do not mind that sometimes, but I felt that this story would have been better for me if it had been longer. But I have no complaints, because compared to Sanditon and the Watsons, which were not even completed, I think we got a good deal with the ending of Lady Susan, although personally I think that it was a rushed ending. Like, Jane probably knew that she could not publish it and just wanted to end it, but yeah. And also a part of me really wanted Lady Susan to win, but I could also appreciate the fact that the morality of Jane Austen rose at that point in time. She was like, I can't give her the happy ending, but I'm not going to give her the terrible ending as well that a lot of people would think she deserved, and I love that. So I gave that 4 stars. I loved it. Moving on to An Ember in the Ashes by Salvatore Erra. Yes, I had never read An Ember in the Ashes series. This is my first time reading it, and I'm reading it in anticipation for the fact that we all know that the last book in this series is coming out in December, and I think I picked the perfect time to get into the series.
Perfect timing.
Now, in An Ember in the Ashes, we follow Laia, who is a young girl living in an empire whose country has been conquered by this very martial empire. So basically, she's kind of, our people basically are kind of living like slaves. And when it is that her brother is taken due to the fact that he's caught with evidence that it should not have been caught with, she runs away to join this revolutionary group in order to try and save her brother, and as such has to spy against the empire in order to save her brother. And you also have Elias, this young boy who is currently in this military academy that is training the best of the best that would rule this empire, and he basically doesn't want any of it. He wants to leave, he's looking to escape. So there's already the seed of revolution planted in him. And then you have his best friend Ellen, who is also living in this empire, but unlike Elias, she is more of one of those people that is duty bound and lives to follow rules. And you have these 3 people, although primarily you have Laia and you have Elias. I know Ellen will probably have a more, because she's central to the story, but we don't get her point of view. But I'm certain that in the later books we will get more of her. This book, I enjoyed it. I loved it. The action was stunt. The pace was fast, incredibly fast. There was a lot of blood, a lot of gore, a lot of torture in this book. So trigger warning for that. But I love the fact that things were happening every single time. I could not put this book down. I remember picking it up one day in September and I binged it. So yes, binge reading Noria is back. I could not put it down. I also appreciated the fact that yes, there was a sprinkling of romance in this, but Salvatore Erra did not turn this into a full-on, like, I love romance. You all know I love romance, but I think that sometimes based on the type of story that is being told, romance can hinder things. And I love that Salvatore Erra did not, like, for the sake of telling a romance, sacrifice the story that she was telling. So I enjoyed it. I loved it. I did think though that the world building in this was not as fleshed out. I could see that it was inspired by the Roman Empire. I could definitely see hints of that in this book. But I do think that just because something is inspired by Roman Empire does not mean that you do not put in a bit of your own world building and fleshing it out, and I think that Sabateher did not really do much of that in this book. I think she just relied on the fact that we'll be able to fill in the gaps, and although I did not mind, but I could see where some people would have a problem with that. You cannot just toss about the naming convention of ancient Rome and a militarized way of living. That does not world building make. You're just basically giving us Rome 2.0.
That's a cop-out.
But I do think that there were hints, the bit of the fantasy elements, bringing them into this infused some much needed world building for me. So I think that now that we know that we're leaving the capital proper, we'll probably get more of that in the next book, and that is one more reason why I'm really looking forward to it. I would also say that word on the street was that this book was going to destroy me and make me numb, and I was going to cry, etc., etc.
You sit on a throne of lies.
See, when I'm giving stories like that, when I'm giving those warnings, I just, at the back of my mind, I'm like, do not be attached to anybody, because everybody will die. So I went into this book expecting more death, and I kind of was a bit disappointed, because I'm like, major characters didn't die, and even some minor characters that I was like, oh my god, it would be so sad if they died. They did not die, and I'm like, I hope the rest of the books will be more painful, because I want pain, and I did not get pain with this book. But I did get a lot of action, and I'm happy with that. I just reached someone that said that, oh, in the first book you don't get as much pain, you get action. So I adjust my expectations. But I went in expecting pain and destruction and devastation, and I did not get it with this book. More death would have made this book a 5-star. More painful death would have made this book a 5-star.
My disappointment is immeasurable, and my day is ruined.
Now moving on to my 5 stars read for the month, which were actually quite a lot, starting with Always Human by Ari North, which take a moment, because like, if you saw that title and you did not think
I'm only human after all,
I'm like, seriously? That's a great song. But anyway, I give this book a 5 stars. It's a graphic novel, and basically science fiction, takes place in the future, whereby humanity has developed these things called mods, which is body modification. So you can modify everything about your body, about your appearance, about your memory, basically about your life. Anything that has to do with you as a person, you can modify. And you have this young girl, Sonati, who is who loves mods, until she runs into Austin, another girl who she sees doesn't actually have any mods, and she thinks, oh, this is very brave of her, and then she's intrigued, and from there we are given this very soft and warm and fuzzy and beautiful and romantic short graphic novel. I wanted more. Like, this book made me love, and was filled with all these very cute depictions and scenes. Like, there was so many awkward gay moments, and I was like, yo, I'm Sonati. Sonati is me. Every single time Sonati's gay ass put her foot in her mouth, I'm like,
I can relate to this.
you know that feeling when you're bumbling and tripping over words, and you don't know what the right words is to say when you meet this girl that takes your breath away. Like, yeah, Ari North was able to capture that perfectly well. I love this. I enjoyed this comic. It was fun, it was light, it was sweet, it was so swoon-worthy and romantic, and there was still conversation about changing yourself, about judging on appearances, about questioning exactly what it is that like had you attracted to someone who is different, you know. And I get it, because it seemed like some part of this conversation did look like they wanted to tackle ableism, but Ari North didn't really go there. I wish that you know, they had actually taken that plunge and actually gone there. But I did enjoy this. I gave it 5 stars. It was so good. The next 5-star read I read was Binti Home by Nnedi Okorafor. You all know, for the last couple of months I've been reading one of these novellas, because Compop has been choosing this book for me. I think he loves the cover. I think he loves the cover, as you all could see from my October TBR video. But I've been reading one of these every month for the last couple of months, and in Binti Home we basically pick up from where we stopped in Binti Secret Fire. So Binti has returned home. She's meeting her people for the first time since she's been at Omza Uni, and I love the fact, see, there's one thing I love about Nnedi Okorafor. Nnedi Okorafor can, in the littlest number of pages possible, full on build a world for you, a world that you lose yourself with, and it takes a lot of talent for you to be able to do that in as little pages as possible. And Nnedi has mastered that. She has more than mastered it. I absolutely loved Binti Home. I love the fact that there was also no miracle cure for Binti's PTSD, because in the previous like in the first book, that's in Binti, she witnessed the mass murder of people and friends she had been traveling with to her new university, and in Sacred Fire she was dealing with that, and we also got more of her dealing with her PTSD in Home. I feel sorry for people that, because apparently Sacred Fire, the first time people are reading Sacred Fire is in this bind up. If you had read it in the initial, the trilogy novella that she had written, there was no Sacred Fire, and I think that me coming, like, it was just a natural progression from Sacred Fire to Home. I love the fact that Lady also brought in another group of people, this nomadic tribe that Binti lives with in Home. I loved it. Like I said, she is the queen of building and creating new worlds and cultures and languages and experiences and making them feel as lived in as possible in as little pages, because I love that hint. I love that hint of, okay, there is even a bit of mystery that has now come into Binti, things we have to solve. I loved it. I would say that the only thing that pulled me a bit out of the story was when Binti went home. She had this argument with her sister, which I could understand Binti's reaction, but the way in which her sister just did a sudden 180, it seemed a bit sudden for me, and there was no hint of it. Even when it was that they had their first reunion at the port, we didn't get that. It just seemed like it was coming out of nowhere. But then when you realize the fact that maybe her sister was dealing with the fact that, okay, she's just coming home, she was overwhelmed with seeing her, and now that time has passed, she's able to really think, they're able to really think about what it is that Binti did, because in the first book Binti ran away from home and now she's returning home, so of course there will be that tension. I didn't think that the part with her friend, I honestly, I knew why Lady brought back her friend into this conversation, because it was her friend, but we didn't really get a hint of him. So there was this conversation she had with him that I just felt slightly off for me. I was like, there is no need for this, but I did enjoy this. I gave this 5 stars.
I love that motherfucking song. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it.
Now moving on to Northanger Abbey. Yes, by Jane Austen. I love this book. I think that this is the funniest, hands down the funniest. Like, I always thought that Emma was funny, and this is the reason why I'm loving my rereads, because I've not reread, like, the last time I read Jane Austen has been like almost 5 years, and I think that your reading taste and who you are as a person, you're constantly evolving and changing. So of course I've changed in the last 5 years since I last read the book, but I loved Northanger Abbey in this reread. It was hilarious. I was chortly. Catherine Morland is my bae, with the overactive imagination and this love for books and this, oh my god, she's just imagining shit and imagining drama. I think that every readers everywhere, when they pick up Northanger Abbey, they would absolutely love Catherine Morland, because she is us. Catherine Morland is our queen. For her to get to Abbey and be like, yo, this is all gothic and shit, oh my god, what if it is that their father killed their mother? I'm just like, Catherine, I love you, I stand you and your overactive imagination. I hope it never dies, because yes, please. I also loved her relationship with Henry Tilney. I loved seeing that grow. I loved seeing that develop.
I love love.
And of course, it's not a Jane Austen novel without some social climbing, some backstabbing, you know, some conversation about class and wealth and societal norms. And I loved every minute of it. I do think that there were things that were, I think that I would have loved it if Northanger Abbey had been slightly longer, because I think the last 5% of this book was very, very rushed, with, you know, Henry coming over, all the revelations that happened with his sister, with his father, everything went really rushed, and I wanted a more painful, harsh punishment, not for Isabella Thorpe, because but John Thorpe, I think John Thorpe got way too easy. But then again, Jane Austen has always prided herself on telling us stories that depict exactly how society worked for women and men during her time. So of course they would get away with it, including Captain Tilney. But I enjoyed Northanger Abbey. I think it's the funniest of all Jane Austen's novels. Like, if I ever meet somebody, like, if it is that you are trying to get into Jane Austen and you're not sure which book to start with, and you love funny stories, and you're like, oh, I want to read a classic book. Most classics are not funny. I would recommend Northanger Abbey. It was hilarious as fuck. Next is my 4th favorite of all time Jane Austen novel, which is Sense and Sensibility. So in this book, right, you have a father who is dying and basically entrusts the welfare of his wife and his daughters to his son. Now, the thing about it is that his son his son was from a marriage to another woman. So she is, even though you can say that the Dashwood heir has good intention, he's basically married to a witch, and she doesn't want him to help his siblings or his stepmother at all. And so you have the Dashwood girls and their mother basically, they go away to the seaside cottage, right? Which I'm like, yeah, I want to be as poor, like I want penury in Jane Austen novels, because they're like, oh my god, the Dashwoods are poor, and I'm like, you have 2 servants, you have a seaside cottage.
I'm sorry, I'm allergic to bullshit.
Anyway, they relocate, it's a change in station, etc. Things happen. Eleanor is in love with the brother of her sister-in-law, the witch. Yes, the brother who is a spineless git. I will get to Edward Ferrars in a bit. And then you have Marianne who wants life. Like, I love the fact that Jane Austen was able to show us sisterly bond, because the bond between Eleanor and Marianne is the core of the story. It's central even in the title, and also how different they are, because Eleanor is she's sensible, she's calm, she's always thoughtful, she's always figuring things out, but even with that, our family is so used to sensible Eleanor that she's able to hide the wealth of emotion she's feeling, and they don't get a hint to that, because the assumption is always when you're calm and when you're sensible, then you're not given to flight of emotion. Unlike Marianne is the sensibility part of Sensibility. She feels everything, she lives so passionately, and I love that. Younger me wanted to be Eleanor so bad, and like thought so badly of Marianne, but older me, I look at her and I'm like, to be able to live life so fully and so well and so joyously, I think we do Marianne Dashwood a disservice by, like, a lot of people criticizing her, and I think that we do her a disservice because she's young and she feels things, and there's nothing wrong with that. And seeing Colonel Brandon tell Eleanor that he does not want her to lose that always makes me so happy, because I'm like, that is somebody that gets it. Yeah, I also think that of all the love interests, Colonel Brandon gets the short end of the stick, which is sad, because a lot of people put him down, they're like, he's old, and I'm like, I don't understand how y'all are like, he's old. I'm like, he's 2 years younger than Mr. Knightley. Like, you all know that, right? I get it, because Sir William Elliot would have been like, it's probably because he was in the army, and you know, Sir William Elliot had that old conversation about how the army and the navy ages the chap, so there is that. But I'm like, Colonel Brandon is actually younger than Mr. Knightley. Everybody's like, Colonel Brandon is old. I'm like, is he though? Compared to Mr. Knightley, is he though? But you all think that Mr. Knightley is a trick, don't you? So anyway, I'm getting carried away. I love Sense and Sensibility. I do feel sad because we didn't get much of Margaret. Every time I reread the book, I'm like, yo, where's Margaret? Like, she's missing for so long. I'm like, why did Jane Austen feel the need to have Margaret Dashwood in there, if not to reflect well off of Edward Ferrars, because she was the one he bonded with? Because let's be real, like, that is the only selling point that stupid ass guy has. Edward Ferrars is trash. Willoughby is, as always, I spit on his fucking grave, piece of shit, garbage man. But yes, I enjoyed Sense and Sensibility. I feel a bit sad that Marianne lost a bit of her gaiety, but I did love what the story had to tell. Also with regards to the fact that you can be sensible and still feel all the wealth of emotion, and there's nothing saying that you cannot balance all that feeling and that passion, you know, with just a little bit of introspection and thinking well and looking out for other people. And I love that we got both. And now for the last book I read in September, which is a 5-star read, is my third favorite Jane Austen novel. It's always like, it switches with Emma, like they switch like this, and that is Persuasion by Jane Austen. You pierce my soul. I am half agony, half hope. God, Captain Wentworth can write a letter. That man can write a letter. Goddamn! If you like, this is a book. Every single time I reread it, I have a deeper appreciation for Anne Elliot. Anne Elliot is calm and stately and collected and beautiful, and just has such quiet dignity and so much strength. Like, God, and has more of a backbone, a bit more backbone than Eleanor Dashwood, even though I also love Eleanor Dashwood. Like, oh my God. And Elliot is Bay and Captain Wentworth. Like, if it is that you've... Okay, let me just give a quick synopsis for those that have not read, that have not read Persuasion. Persuasion is your pining lovers trope. It's your pining lovers who have been in love with each other for decades trope. They were dating and then they broke up, and then one person is hurt and enraged and the other person is pining, but turns out that even beneath all that rage and pain is still mutual pining. That is Persuasion. That is Persuasion. And I love this. I absolutely adore. I think it's one of the most romantic of Jane Austen's novels. And Pride and Prejudice is my favorite Jane Austen novel, like no dispute on that, but I think that Persuasion is one of her most romantic novels. The romance in this book. The romance! God. I love Persuasion. The strength of an Elliot, the devotion of Captain Wentworth, that letter, I honestly think that it's so cool. And of course, it's not a Jane Austen novel if there's no a conversation about class, right? It's not a Jane Austen novel if she's not talking about wealth and societal norms, you know, and always this critique of it with this tongue-in-cheek way of writing. I just think it's lovely. I think that her being able to, you know, bring us in to laugh at Sir William Elliot, who is rich, yes, but who has blown all his wealth and who is so concerned with appearances that he would... I don't want to go into details because I don't want to spoil this book. But as always, they are social climbers. As always, they are wealthy people who do not know how to manage their wealth. And as always, there's a beloved Jane Austen heroine who stays true to who she is and still gets love and wealth in the bargain. I loved it. I love Persuasion. It's my third favorite Jane Austen novel. And the only reason why sometimes Emma beats it is because Emma has so many funny moments. I'm like, I'm a girl that loves to laugh. But yeah, so those are all the books I read in September. All 12 of them. I hope to read even more books in October, because it'll be cool, wouldn't it? But let me know what was a 5-star read for you in September. Drop it in the comments. I want to know. Because as always, I'm always looking for recommendations and new books to add to my list and new books to buy. So I often comb through my wrap-up videos and look at the comments when I'm ready to buy new books so that I can just like add and everything else. So please drop it down in the comments. Thank you. And that would be the end of this video. If you liked it, please do not forget to give a big thumbs up. Check out my other videos. Subscribe if you want to. And if you do decide to subscribe, please click on that notification bell. So like after you click subscribe, click on the bell so you can have all notifications turned on so you don't miss any of my videos. I make new videos every Wednesdays and Sundays at 2 p.m. EST. Yes, that is 2 p.m. EST, and I'll see you soon. Until then, stay passionate, love books, love yourself. Bye.